Good evening, Tim.
Good evening.
Tell us a little bit about how your family ended up needing the services and care of Miracle Hill.
It actually wasn't my family in the beginning, it was my father. Although our family benefited from Miracle Hill, my father had been overcome by alcohol. He was homeless, and he had no place to go. And he came upon the rescue mission and heard that they had meals, free meals, and a roof. And it was raining one night, and he came upon the rescue mission, and one of the great things that happened to him that night was they turned him away. And I think that was a turning point for him. And they turned him away because he was intoxicated. And that's where he met Reed Lehman. And they told him to come back tomorrow sober, and they would let him into the program. So he had to do something himself. And they put that on him. And I think it was a turning point in his life.
How did your father end up then getting through the mission?
He came back the next day. He went through the program. He learned about our Jesus Christ, our Savior. He learned all about God's grace. And when you're in a situation like he was, you don't feel worthy of God's love and grace. And a lot of people who are in those situations don't feel worthy of being blessed. And so he went through the program. He detoxed there. He did it by himself, and he never drank again.
Now, after he finished the program initially, he tried right away to get back into you and your family's life. How did you react to that?
I didn't react very well. Actually, hate's a very strong word. And my dad left us when I was 2 years old, and there was eight of us. And so my mom tried to raise us, and 5 of my siblings went to Connie Maxwell Children's Home in Greenwood, South Carolina. And I was the youngest, so I stayed there with my mom, and my grandparents helped raise me. And I didn't want to believe, that he was trying to do good. I didn't want him back into my life. And by that time, my mother had remarried, and I had a father figure who had a tremendous impact on my life, and I didn't want my dad to come back and interfere with that. And so I was very much against him coming back into our family, and didn't want to believe that he was actually someone different than what I had seen. And the times that he had visited me, just the few times that he had visited me, he was always intoxicated. So I didn't want any part of that.
But you did eventually let him in your life, and then you saw what impact from Miracle Hill.
Yeah, I did, and it was after my freshman year in college. I was paying my way through school and working, and my sophomore year, I went to the registrar's office, and I didn't have enough money to start my second year in school. So I came back home, and my mother, she said, "You really need to go talk to your dad. He really wants to help you." And I figured he owed me. I figured I needed the money, and he owed it to me. So I agreed to meet with him. I met him for lunch, and you got to understand, I didn't know him. I didn't know him at all. And so I met him that day, and I took the money, and I went off to school. But the agreement was between him and I that I would meet him for lunch at least once a month when I came home from school. And once a month became once a week. And I got to know my father. And people under the influence of alcohol and people under the influence of drugs, you really don't know who those people are. That's not them. It's not the real them. And as I got to know him, and as I began to believe that it was real, I really began to love him and understand him.
And you said before that it's not just the impact on him as an individual or you as his son, but the impact went through your whole family.
Oh, absolutely. Had a tremendous effect on our family. And when I talked a little earlier about hatred, I mean, I had a hard heart. I grew up a tough kid. Got in a lot of fights in elementary school, middle school, and you know, as you can imagine. I mean, it was a lot of that was the anger, you know, coming out. And then, so I began to change. I learned how to forgive and learned how to love. And my siblings, they're all doing great. Some of them are here tonight. You know, all married and been in marriages and successful, and have fortunately learned from our dad's mistakes that and the impact that alcohol and addiction can have on a family. So we're all doing very well, and some of them are here and love them very much. I'm very proud of them.
You said once before, though, that you actually take it a step further. You use what you learned and what you got from Miracle Hill to help other people?
Absolutely. You know, one thing I learned, you know, I learned the right things to do in life. You know, I learned what not to do and what to do to have a peaceful life. And people recognize that. And I'm in the trucking business, and I see a lot of people. I'm in sales and marketing, and we have people drivers. But as I get to know people, they see something different, and a lot of times they come talk to me about whatever issues they have. And when I hear my story, they're a little bit shocked, because I had one guy tell me, he says, "Man, you don't look like the son of a homeless guy. You know, you look like a guy that grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth, you know." And I said, "No, believe it or not, that's a real story." And I have a hard time believing that. And it really helps us with common ground.
You also told me when we spoke previously that you have a sort of different concept, or your idea of church is a little bit different. Tell the audience about that.
Absolutely. This is the church. Miracle Hill means so much to me and to my family. This is God's work. And the traditional church, we all like to think of it as somewhere we go for, you know, for an hour or two on Sunday and maybe a Wednesday night or whatever, but it's brick and mortar. And the church has missions outside of it, which is great, but Miracle Hill every day is a mission. And Miracle Hill every day is doing God's work. And I firmly believe that this is the church. So when I think about tithes and offerings, these are things that I consider at Miracle Hill when we do our tithes and offerings every year, because we know this is God's work and this is the church.
One last question. Summarize you, your family, your father's experience, where you started, where you ended.
I'll tell you a story. When I was in the 7th grade, when my dad came back home. Now, the other thing that we haven't talked about, my dad went to prison. He started drinking when he was 12 years old, uneducated. When he left my mom, he was running with a group of guys and was arrested and went to prison for attempted manslaughter, or attempted murder. And so when he came back to Greenville after he got out of prison, I went to school one day, and in the newspaper, one of our homeroom teachers in middle school had read a story about a man named Bill Guin last night on Washington Street in a gunfight. And none of my friends knew who Bill Guin was. But the problem was that he gave our home address as his address. Now, at the time, my mother was married to another man who was my stepfather. And so I was furious. I was embarrassed. And it was a bad time for me. So the hatred just went up another notch at that time. And then later on, when I met him again to go to college and take the money and started meeting him, I just noticed it was a different person. It was, and he never drank. He became a manager of Dixie Waste Paper Company. He was very involved in our family. And my family, you know, I was the last one. I was the last one to accept him. So he's very involved in everything that they did, and became a father. One that I never thought was possible. And so I think of at Miracle Hill, and I think about my father, and I also think about the crucifixion. You know, the thief on the cross, you know, and God's grace just blesses that thief because he believed. And I think about my father. And then You know, so he started out in this newspaper. His name was in writing in the 7th grade in bad light. And then Reed writes his book, God Wears His Own Watch. And he sent me a copy. And there's my dad's story in a very good light. And the testimony in that chapter, I don't know if you've had a chance to read that. If you haven't, I encourage you to do so. But so that's how the story ends.
That's a great story. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Tim.
thank you.
Kevin.